The stagecoach lurched violently as it rounded the bend through the Wyoming wilderness, and Beatrice Morgan felt rough hands shove hard against her shoulders before the world became a spinning blur of white and cold. She hit the snowdrift with enough force to knock the breath from her lungs, her traveling dress tangling around her legs as she sank deep into the powder. The stage rattled on without stopping, the cruel laughter of the two card sharps who had robbed her fading into the howling wind of the January afternoon in 1883. Beatrice struggled to pull herself upright, her gloved hands scraping uselessly against the deep snow. Her reticule was gone, taken along with the $30 she had saved from her teaching position back in Cheyenne. Her trunk with all her possessions remained strapped to the top of the stage, headed to Rawlins without her. The cold bit through her wool coat immediately, and she realized with growing terror that she was alone on an empty stretch of road with the sun already starting its descent toward the mountains. The temperature would drop dangerously once darkness fell. She tried to call out, but her voice came out weak and shaking. Her ankle throbbed where it had twisted in the fall. When she attempted to stand, pain shot through her leg and she collapsed back into the drift. Tears stung her eyes, freezing on her lashes. She had been traveling to Rawlins to take a position as schoolteacher, her first real opportunity since graduating from the teaching college. Now, she would likely freeze to death on this desolate road, and no one would even know what had happened to her. The sound of hoofbeats made her heart leap with desperate hope. She called out again, louder this time, though her voice still trembled. A dark horse appeared around the bend, its rider sitting tall in the saddle. As he drew closer, she could make out a man in his mid-20s wearing a sheepskin coat dusted with snow. A wide-brimmed hat pulled low against the wind. His face was weathered from outdoor work, with a strong jaw shadowed by a few days of stubble and sharp blue eyes that widened when they spotted her struggling in the drift. "Madam." He swung down from his horse before the animal had fully stopped, his boots crunching through the snow as he hurried toward her. "What in blazes happened? Are you hurt?" The stage, Beatrice managed through chattering teeth. "Two men, they robbed me and pushed me out." "Please, my ankle." He did not wait for her to finish. In one smooth motion, he scooped her up from the snow, his arms solid and steady beneath her. She found herself pressed against the warm fleece of his coat, catching the scent of leather and wood smoke. "We need to get you warm." "My ranch is 2 miles back. Can you hold on that long?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. He carried her to his horse, a handsome bay gelding that stood perfectly still as he lifted her into the saddle. He swung up behind her, one arm wrapping securely around her waist as he gathered the reins. She leaned back against his chest, seeking his warmth as he turned the horse and urged it into a steady lope. "I'm Caleb Young," he said, his voice close to her ear. "I own a cattle ranch just west of here. You are fortunate I was heading back from checking the northern fence line. Nobody uses this road much in winter." "Beatrice Morgan," she replied, her teeth still chattering. "I was traveling to Rawlins. I am supposed to start teaching at the school next week." His arm tightened fractionally around her waist. "We will get word to them. First, we need to make sure you are all right. How bad is your ankle?" "I can move it. I think it might just be twisted." She paused, then added, "Thank you for stopping. I thought I was going to die out there." "No decent man would ride past a lady in distress," he said firmly. "Can you describe the men who did this?" She closed her eyes, remembering. One was tall and thin with a scar across his cheek. The other was shorter, heavy-set, with a mustache. They boarded the stage at the last way station and started playing cards with an older gentleman. When he fell asleep, they went through his pockets, then mine. When I threatened to report them at the next stop, they just laughed and threw me out. Caleb's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping in his cheek. Sounds like the Carson brothers. They have been causing trouble between here and Laramie for months. The law has not been able to catch them yet, but they are getting bolder. The ranch appeared ahead, a sturdy log house with smoke rising from the chimney, surrounded by several outbuildings and corrals. Even through her discomfort, Beatrice could see it was well maintained, the fences solid and the barn doors shut tight against the cold. Caleb rode straight to the house, dismounting and reaching up to lift her down with careful strength. A grizzled man in his 60s emerged from the barn, his eyes widening when he saw Beatrice in Caleb's arms. "What happened, boss?" "Get Doc Harrison from town, Frank. This lady was robbed and pushed from the stage. Her ankle is injured." Caleb was already carrying her up the steps to the porch. "And send word to the sheriff about the Carson brothers. Right away." The older man was already heading for the barn to saddle a fresh horse. Inside, the house was blessedly warm. Caleb carried her to a settee near the fireplace and set her down gently. "Let me get these wet things off you before you catch pneumonia." His fingers were surprisingly deft as he unbuttoned her coat and eased it off her shoulders, then removed her soaked gloves. Her dress was damp where the snow had soaked through, and she was shivering uncontrollably. He disappeared and returned moments later with a thick quilt and a flannel shirt. "The bedroom is through there. Can you manage to change, or do you need help?" Despite her distress, Beatrice felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I can manage, thank you." He helped her limp to the bedroom, then closed the door to give her privacy. Her fingers fumbled with the buttons of her dress, clumsy with cold. She peeled off the damp fabric and her equally wet petticoats, leaving them in a heap on the floor. The flannel shirt was enormous on her frame, hanging nearly to her knees, but it was warm and dry. She wrapped the quilt around herself and hobbled back to the main room. Caleb had stoked the fire and was heating water in a kettle. When he turned and saw her, something flickered in his eyes, concern mixed with something else she could not quite identify. "Sit down and elevate that ankle. The doctor should be here within the hour." She sank back onto the settee, and he brought her a cup of hot coffee laced with honey. The warmth spreading through her hands and then her chest was heavenly. "You have been very kind. I do not know how to thank you." "No thanks needed." He pulled a wooden chair over and sat facing her, his expression serious. "Tell me about this teaching position. Were they expecting you on today's stage?" "Yes. I sent a telegram last week confirming my arrival. They will be wondering what happened to me. I will ride into Rawlins tomorrow morning and explain the situation. I am sure they will understand given the circumstances." He paused, studying her face. "You look young for a teacher, if you do not mind me saying." "I am 22. I graduated from teaching college in Denver last spring." She took another sip of coffee. "This was my first real position. I have been working as a governess in Cheyenne, but I wanted something more permanent." "Rawlins will be lucky to have you," he said, and the sincerity in his voice warmed her more than the coffee. "It is a rough town in some ways, but the people are decent for the most part. They have needed a good teacher for months." The door opened and Frank returned, stomping snow from his boots. "Doc is on his way. Sheriff Brennan is coming too. He wants to hear about the Carson brothers firsthand." The next hour passed in a blur. Dr. Harrison, a no-nonsense man in his 50s, examined her ankle and pronounced it a bad sprain but not broken. He wrapped it tightly and instructed her to stay off it for at least a week. Sheriff Brennan, a weathered man with a drooping mustache, took detailed notes about the robbery and the Carson brothers, promising to send telegrams to surrounding towns. "You will need to stay somewhere while that ankle heals," the doctor said, packing his medical bag. "The hotel in town is not very comfortable, I am afraid." "She can stay here," Caleb said immediately. I have a spare bedroom and my housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, comes 3 times a week. It would be perfectly respectable." Beatrice opened her mouth to protest, but the doctor nodded approvingly. "Best idea. She should not be traveling or walking much for several days. Young can get word to the school board that you will be delayed." After the doctor and sheriff left, an awkward silence fell. Beatrice clutched the quilt tighter. "I cannot impose on you like this. You have already done so much. It is not an imposition." Caleb stood and moved to the window, looking out at the darkening sky. "This ranch gets lonely sometimes. My father built it 20 years ago, and when he died 3 years back, it passed to me. I run it with Frank and 2 other hands. We manage, but it is not the same as having family around." He turned back to her, and she saw a loneliness in his eyes that matched something in her own heart. "Besides, I could not live with myself if something happened to you because I sent you away injured." "Then I accept with gratitude," she said softly, "but only until my ankle heals." He smiled for the first time since he had found her, transforming his serious face into something altogether more appealing. "Fair enough. Are you hungry? I am not much of a cook, but I can manage stew and biscuits." "I am starving, actually." He proved to be better than passable in the kitchen, producing a hearty beef stew and surprisingly light biscuits. They ate at the kitchen table, and Beatrice found herself telling him about her childhood in a small town in Illinois, how she had always wanted to teach, how she had worked extra jobs to save money for college. He listened intently, asking thoughtful questions, and gradually she learned his story too. "My father came west after the war," Caleb explained. "He wanted open land, freedom. He worked odd jobs for years until he had enough to buy this property. He taught me everything about ranching, about treating animals and land with respect. When the fever took him, I thought about selling, moving to a city. But this place is in my blood now. I cannot imagine living anywhere else. It must be hard, though, working it alone." "I am not completely alone. Frank has been with us since the beginning. The other hands are good men. But yes, sometimes I think about what it would be like to have a wife, children, to build something that outlasts me." He looked down at his plate, suddenly self-conscious. "Sorry. You do not need to hear me philosophizing." "No, I understand." And she did, more than she expected. She had spent so long focused on her education and career that she had rarely let herself think about marriage and family. But sitting in this warm kitchen with this steady, kind man, something shifted inside her chest. That night, she lay in the spare bedroom under a mountain of quilts, listening to the wind howl outside. Her ankle throbbed despite the laudanum the doctor had left, but she felt safer than she had in months. There was something solid about Caleb Young, something trustworthy. She thought about his arms around her on the horse, the gentle way he had carried her, the concern in his blue eyes. She barely knew him, but already she felt drawn to him in a way that both excited and frightened her. The next morning, she woke to find him gone to Rawlins as promised. Mrs. Chen arrived, a small Chinese woman with sharp eyes and a warm smile who clucked over Beatrice like a mother hen. She brought fresh bread and helped Beatrice wash and dress in a spare house dress that was too large but clean and comfortable. "Mr. Caleb is a good man," Mrs. Chen said as she brushed out Beatrice's long brown hair. "He helped many people. 2 winters ago, he took in family whose farm burned. Let them stay until spring found them new land. He has big heart." "He has been very kind to me," Beatrice agreed, feeling warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the fire. Caleb returned that afternoon with news. "I spoke with Thomas Wright, the head of the school board. He was very concerned about what happened to you. They are happy to hold the position until you are recovered, and they are already working with the sheriff to recover your trunk." He handed her a small bundle. The general store owner's wife heard what happened. She sent these for you. Inside were two simple but well-made dresses, undergarments, and a warm shawl. Tears pricked Beatrice's eyes at the kindness of strangers. I will have to thank her. She said to tell you that any woman brave enough to come west to teach deserves support. He sat down across from her, his hat in his hands. I also stopped by the telegraph office. The Carson brothers were spotted near Rock Springs. The law is closing in on them. Good. They should face justice for what they did. Over the following days, a routine developed. Caleb would rise before dawn to tend to ranch duties, but he always returned for breakfast, which Beatrice insisted on helping prepare despite her ankle. They would eat together, talking about everything and nothing, books they had read, places they wanted to see, memories of childhood, dreams for the future. In the afternoons, while Caleb worked, Beatrice would read from his surprisingly extensive library or work on mending, feeling increasingly comfortable in his home. Evenings were her favorite time. After supper, they would sit by the fire, and Caleb would tell her stories about the ranch, about cattle drives and blizzards, about the time a mountain lion had tried to take down a calf, and he had scared it off with nothing but a torch and shouting. She told him about her students in Denver, about the satisfaction of seeing a child's face light up when they finally understood a difficult concept. You really love teaching, he observed one night, watching her face glow with enthusiasm. I do. There is something profound about shaping young minds, helping them see possibilities they never imagined. She paused, then added quietly, My own teacher in Illinois changed my life. I was just a farmer's daughter who loved books. She convinced my parents to let me continue my education. I want to do that for other children. Rollins is fortunate to have you, he said, but there was something in his voice that made her look at him sharply. He was staring into the fire, his jaw tight. I suppose once your ankle heals, you will be eager to start your new position. Yes, of course. But even as she said it, she realized with a start that the thought of leaving this ranch, leaving him, filled her with unexpected sadness. When had that happened? When had this place started feeling like home? By the end of the first week, her ankle was much improved. She could walk without limping, though the doctor had cautioned her to take things slowly. Caleb suggested a short walk outside, and she bundled up in the borrowed clothes and shawl. The afternoon was crisp and clear, the snow sparkling in the sunlight. He offered his arm, and she took it, acutely aware of the strength beneath his coat. They walked slowly toward the corrals where several horses stood watching them with interest. That bay is mine, the one who carried us both, Caleb said, pointing. His name is Ranger. The sorrel mare is Daisy. She is gentle as a lamb. Would you like to meet her? Beatrice had limited experience with horses, but she nodded. Caleb led her to the fence and whistled softly. Daisy trotted over, and he produced a carrot from his pocket. Hold your hand flat. He guided her hand, and the mare lipped up the treat with velvet softness. She is beautiful, Beatrice breathed, reaching up carefully to stroke the horse's nose. She needs riding more regularly than I can give her, if you stayed. He stopped abruptly, then continued in a different tone. If you plan to live in Rollins, you should learn to ride properly. A teacher might need to travel to outlying farms for students who cannot come to town. Would you teach me? The words came out before she could think about them. He turned to face her, and suddenly they were very close. I would teach you anything you wanted to learn. The air between them seemed to crackle with something electric. Beatrice's heart pounded so loudly she was certain he could hear it. His eyes dropped to her lips, and she held her breath, wondering if he would kiss her. But then Daisy snorted and tossed her head, breaking the moment. Caleb stepped back, clearing his throat. We should get you back inside before you get too cold. That night, Beatrice lay awake for hours, replaying that almost kiss in her mind. She was falling in love with him. The realization should have terrified her, but instead it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Caleb Young was everything she had never known. She wanted: steady, kind, hardworking, with a quiet strength and a gentle heart. But what did he feel? Sometimes she caught him looking at her with such intensity that her breath would catch. Other times, he seemed to deliberately put distance between them, as if afraid of something. The answer came 2 days later. She was in the kitchen making bread when Caleb burst through the door, his face dark with anger. "The sheriff just left. They caught the Carson brothers. They will stand trial next month in Laramie. He needs you to come testify." "Of course. I will do whatever is necessary." She wiped flour from her hands. "Is something else wrong?" He paced the kitchen like a caged animal. "When they searched the brothers' belongings, they found your reticule. The money was gone, spent on whiskey and cards, but there was a letter inside." He pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "The sheriff thought you should have it back." She took the letter, recognizing her mother's handwriting. It was the last letter her mother had sent before dying of influenza the previous winter. She had carried it with her everywhere, a precious reminder. "Thank you," she whispered, clutching it to her chest. "Beatrice." The way he said her name made her look up sharply. His eyes were turbulent, conflicted. "The sheriff also said your trunk arrived in Rawlins. Everything is intact. The school board has secured lodging for you at a respectable boarding house. You can start your position whenever you are ready." "Oh." The single word came out small and lost. This was what she had wanted, what she had come to Wyoming for. So why did it feel like her heart was breaking? "My ankle is much better now. I suppose I should go soon." "Is that what you want?" He crossed to her in 3 long strides, his hands gripping her shoulders. "Tell me honestly, Beatrice, is teaching in Rawlins really what you want?" She looked up into his face, seeing her own turmoil reflected there. "I do not know any more. A month ago it was all I wanted, but now—" She trailed off, afraid to voice what she was feeling. "But now," he prompted, his voice rough, "now I cannot imagine leaving here, leaving you." The words tumbled out in a rush. "I know it is foolish. We have only known each other for 10 days, but I feel more at home here than I have anywhere else in my life. When I think about living in town, about only seeing you occasionally, it hurts." His hands tightened on her shoulders. "Do you have any idea what these past 10 days have been like for me? Having you here, talking with you, laughing with you, and knowing you would leave as soon as you were healed. I told myself I was just being a good Samaritan, helping someone in need. But the truth is, I started falling for you the moment I lifted you out of that snowdrift." "Caleb," she breathed. "I love you, Beatrice Morgan. I know it is fast. I know we barely know each other, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs stroking her cheeks. "Stay, not as my guest, but as my wife. We can hire another teacher for Rawlins, or if you want to continue teaching, we can build a schoolhouse here for the ranch families in the area. Whatever you want, we will make it work. Just please do not leave me." Joy exploded through her chest, so intense it was almost painful. "Yes," she said, and then louder, "yes, I will marry you. I love you too, so much it frightens me." He kissed her then, and it was everything a first kiss should be: tender and passionate and full of promise. She wound her arms around his neck, pressing closer, and he lifted her right off her feet, spinning her around in the kitchen. When he finally set her down, they were both breathless and grinning like fools. "We should do this properly," he said, suddenly serious. "I want to court you, take you to dances in town, let everyone see how lucky I am, and we should wait a respectable time before the wedding." "How long?" she asked, tracing the line of his jaw with her fingertips. "Would 3 months be too soon?" He caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "I want to marry you in the spring when the wildflowers are blooming. 3 months sounds perfect." They stood in the kitchen holding each other, making plans and promises as the bread dough rose forgotten on the counter. When Mrs. Chen arrived the next day and heard the news, she cried happy tears and immediately began planning the wedding feast. Frank shook Caleb's hand so hard he nearly pulled his arm from the socket, then welcomed Beatrice to the family with gruff affection. Word spread quickly through the community. Thomas Wright from the school board came personally to offer congratulations and assure Beatrice that they had found another teacher, a young man from Denver who was eager for the position. The general store owner's wife, Mrs. Patterson, arrived with fabric for a wedding dress and refused to take payment. The local minister, Reverend Collins, agreed enthusiastically to perform the ceremony. Those 3 months passed in a blur of happiness. Caleb courted her with single-minded determination, taking her on sleigh rides through the snowy countryside, teaching her to ride Daisy, bringing her wildflowers when the first brave blooms pushed through the melting snow. He was patient and gentle, never pushing for more than kisses, though the passion between them grew more intense with each passing day. Beatrice threw herself into learning about ranch life, spending hours with Mrs. Chen learning to cook the hearty meals the ranch hands needed, studying the account books with Caleb, even helping with the spring calving. She discovered she had a knack for handling the livestock and a genuine love for the hard work and open spaces. She also made good on her desire to teach. Several families in the area had children who could not make the trip to Rawlins regularly, and she began holding informal lessons in the ranch house twice a week. Caleb was so proud of her efforts that he announced plans to build a proper one-room schoolhouse on the property by the end of summer. The wedding took place on a perfect April morning in 1883. Beatrice wore a simple but elegant dress of ivory silk that Mrs. Patterson had helped her sew, with wildflowers woven through her hair. Caleb looked impossibly handsome in a new suit, his eyes shining with love and joy as she walked down the aisle of the small church in Rawlins on Frank's arm. "I, Caleb, take you, Beatrice, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he said, his voice strong and sure. "I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you all the days of my life. I promise to support your dreams, to stand beside you in hardship, and to build with you a life worth living." She spoke her own vows through happy tears, and when Reverend Collins pronounced them husband and wife, Caleb kissed her with such tenderness that several ladies in the congregation sniffled into their handkerchiefs. The reception at the ranch was a joyous affair with food, music, and dancing that lasted well into the evening. But eventually, the last guests departed, and Beatrice and Caleb were finally alone in the house that was now truly their home. He carried her over the threshold of their bedroom, a tradition he insisted on observing, and set her down gently beside the bed. "I have dreamed of this moment since the day I met you," he said softly, his fingers working the buttons of her dress. "My beautiful wife." Their wedding night was a revelation of tenderness and passion, of whispered promises and gentle discoveries. Caleb was patient and attentive, making sure her first experience of physical love was everything it should be. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the moonlight streaming through the window, talking and laughing and making more plans for their future. "How many children do you want?" Beatrice asked, tracing lazy patterns on his chest. "As many as you are willing to give me," he replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I was an only child, and I always wished for brothers and sisters. I would love to have a houseful of little ones." "I want that too. A big, noisy, happy family." "Then that is what we will have," he promised. The following months and years proved that promise true. Beatrice thrived as a rancher's wife, her strength and resilience growing with each season. The little schoolhouse was built that summer, and by fall, she was teaching 15 children from neighboring ranches. Caleb expanded the herd and the ranch prospered, allowing them to hire more hands and purchase additional land. Their first child, a boy they named James after Caleb's father, was born in March of 1884 during a late snowstorm. Caleb paced the floor anxiously while Mrs. Chen and the midwife attended to Beatrice, and when he finally heard the baby's first cry, he burst into the bedroom with tears streaming down his face. Beatrice, exhausted but radiant, placed their son in his arms, and she watched as this strong, capable man melted at the sight of his child. "He is perfect," Caleb whispered, his voice choked. "You are amazing. I love you so much." James was followed by Sarah 2 years later, then Matthew, and finally twin girls Emma and Rose in 1890. The house was indeed noisy and full of love, exactly as they had dreamed. Caleb was a devoted father, teaching his children to ride before they could barely walk, reading to them every night, involving them in the ranch work as they grew older. Beatrice balanced teaching and motherhood with grace, though some years it was harder than others. When the twins were infants and she was overwhelmed, Caleb hired a young woman from town to help with the children so Beatrice could continue her school. "Your teaching matters," he told her firmly when she protested the expense. "Those children need you, and I know how much you need it too. We will make it work." In 1892, tragedy struck when a drought threatened to devastate the ranch. Feed was scarce and expensive, water sources dried up, and Caleb was forced to make the agonizing decision to sell off a significant portion of the herd to save the rest. Beatrice watched him age 10 years in those months, the worry eating at him. But she stood by him steadfastly, and together they weathered the crisis. When the rains finally came, they rebuilt slowly but surely. The Carson brothers' trial had taken place as scheduled in the spring of 1883, with Beatrice providing testimony that helped convict them. They were sentenced to 10 years in the territorial prison, and she felt a sense of justice and closure. The money they had stolen was never recovered, but Caleb always joked that it was the best $30 he had never spent, since it had brought Beatrice into his life. Over the years, the ranch became a centerpiece of the community. Beatrice's school gained an excellent reputation, and students came from farther and farther away. Caleb served on the town council and helped establish better roads and services for the scattered ranching community. Together, they were known for their hospitality, their integrity, and their deep love for each other that never seemed to fade with time. On their 10th wedding anniversary in April of 1893, Caleb took Beatrice back to the spot where he had found her by the side of the road. A simple wooden marker stood there now, which he had placed years earlier. It read, "Here began our love story. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I had ridden a different route that day," he said, holding her close as they looked out over the land they loved. "If I had been an hour later or gone a different direction, it terrifies me to think we might never have met." "But you did come," Beatrice said, turning in his arms to face him. "You saved me in every way a person can be saved. You gave me love, a home, a family, a purpose bigger than myself. I was so lost before I met you, even though I did not realize it then. I thought I knew what I wanted, but you showed me what I needed. You saved me too," he said seriously. "I was just going through the motions, working myself to exhaustion so I would not have to think about how lonely I was. You brought light and laughter and meaning to my life. Every single day I wake up grateful that those terrible men pushed you from that stage." She laughed. "That might be the strangest thing to be grateful for. Maybe, but it is true nonetheless. He kissed her then, as tenderly as he had on their wedding day, and she melted against him, still amazed after 10 years that his touch could make her heart race. They stood there a long time, two people who had found each other against all odds, whose love had not just endured but deepened with each passing year. Behind them, the ranch sprawled across the Wyoming landscape, a testament to their hard work and shared dreams. Ahead lay more years together, more challenges and triumphs, more quiet moments and grand adventures. When they finally returned home, their 5 children rushed out to greet them, followed by Frank, now gray-haired and moving slower but still devoted to the family. Mrs. Chen had prepared a special anniversary dinner, and the evening was filled with food and stories and laughter. James, now 9 years old and already looking like his father, entertained everyone with his imitations of various ranch animals. Sarah, 7 and studious like her mother, showed off the book she had been reading. Matthew, 6 and full of mischief, proudly displayed a frog he had caught. The 3-year-old twins tumbled around like puppies, getting into everything and making everyone laugh. After the children were finally in bed, Caleb and Beatrice sat on the porch in the warm spring evening, watching the stars come out over the mountains. He held her hand, his thumb rubbing gentle circles on her palm. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Giving up your teaching position in town, tying yourself to this ranch and to me?" She looked at him in genuine surprise. "Never, not for one single moment. This life we have built together, it is more than I ever dreamed possible. I get to teach children who desperately need education. I have a husband who loves and respects me. I have beautiful, healthy children. I have a community that values me. How could I possibly regret any of it? Sometimes I worry that I am selfish, keeping you out here when you could have had a career in a real school, maybe even become a principal or professor. Caleb young, you listen to me." She turned to face him fully, her expression fierce. "You have never kept me from anything. You have supported every dream I have ever had. You built me a schoolhouse. You hire help so I can teach. You read educational journals with me and discuss teaching methods. You encourage our children to value learning. You are the least selfish man I have ever known, and I will not have you doubting that." He smiled, the worry leaving his eyes. "You always know what to say to set me straight." "That is what wives are for," she said with a grin. "Among other things." He laughed and pulled her close, and they sat in comfortable silence as the night deepened around them. An owl hooted from the barn, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. The familiar sounds of their life, the soundtrack of their happiness. The years continued to roll by, bringing changes both expected and unexpected. In 1895, the railroad finally extended a line closer to Rawlins, making travel and shipping easier. The ranch prospered, and Caleb was able to hire additional hands and purchase more cattle. He invested in new breeding stock, improving the quality of the herd, and the young ranch became known throughout Wyoming for its fine cattle. Beatrice's school continued to grow as well. By 1897, she was teaching 25 students ranging in age from 5 to 15. She took immense pride in seeing her students succeed, and several went on to attend college back east, something that would have been unthinkable without her rigorous instruction. Parents traveled miles to enroll their children, knowing their sons and daughters would receive an education equal to any town school. In 1898, when James turned 14, he told his parents he wanted to become a veterinarian. Caleb was secretly disappointed that his eldest son did not want to take over the ranch, but he and Beatrice supported the decision wholeheartedly. They began saving money for James to attend veterinary college in Colorado, determined that their children would have every opportunity to pursue their passions. Sarah surprised everyone by declaring she wanted to be a lawyer, inspired by a case she had followed in the newspapers. This was even more unusual than James's ambitions, as women lawyers were extremely rare, but Beatrice was thrilled to see her daughter dreaming so big. "If that is what you want, we will find a way," she promised, and Caleb agreed without hesitation. Matthew showed every sign of wanting to be a rancher like his father, spending every free moment with the cattle and horses. The twins were still young, their futures unwritten, but they kept the household lively with their endless energy and imagination. In the summer of 1899, Beatrice turned 38 and realized with some surprise that she had now spent nearly half her life on the ranch. That young woman who had been pushed from the stage into the snowdrifts seemed like a different person, someone from another lifetime. She thought back to her younger self, so focused on her teaching career, so certain she knew exactly what she wanted. That Beatrice had been brave and determined, but she had also been lonely without realizing it, searching for purpose and connection. "What are you thinking about?" Caleb asked one evening, finding her standing at the window of their bedroom, staring out at the sunset. "How different my life turned out from what I planned," she said, "and how grateful I am for that." He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "Any regrets?" "Only that I cannot go back and tell that scared young woman in the snowdrift that everything was going to be more than all right, that her life was about to begin." She leaned back against him. "What about you? Do you ever wish you had married a proper ranch wife, someone who grew up knowing this life?" "You are a proper ranch wife," he said firmly. "You work as hard as anyone, you have made this house a home, you have given me incredible children. And you have made me happier than I ever thought possible. I would not change a single thing about you or our life together." She turned in his arms and kissed him, still feeling the flutter in her stomach that his nearness always provoked. After 16 years of marriage, he could still make her feel like a bride. "I love you, Caleb Young. And I love you, Beatrice Young, from now until the end of time." The new century arrived with celebration and hope. The entire community gathered in Rawlins for a New Year's Eve dance, and Caleb and Beatrice waltzed together under decorations proclaiming the dawn of the 20th century. Their children watched, giggling at their parents' romance, while other couples smiled at the sight of a marriage that had not just endured but flourished. 16 years ago, I never would have believed I could be this happy," Caleb murmured as they swayed to the music. "Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for taking a chance on a lonely rancher. Thank you for stopping your horse that day," Beatrice replied. "Thank you for seeing me, for valuing me, for building a life with me." They danced until long past midnight, surrounded by friends and family, their love still as fresh and vital as it had been in that moment by the corrals when they had almost kissed for the first time. Later, walking back to their wagon under a sky full of stars, their children sleepy and happy around them, Beatrice thought about how one terrible moment had led to a lifetime of joy. The Carson brothers had meant to rob and discard her, never imagining they were pushing her toward her destiny. The cold had meant to freeze her, but instead it had led her to the warmth of love. What had seemed like the worst day of her life had actually been the best, because it had brought her Caleb. She glanced at her husband, driving the wagon with their youngest daughter drowsing against his shoulder, and her heart swelled with gratitude and love. Their story had started with violence and fear, but it had become something beautiful, a testament to resilience and hope, and the unexpected ways life could bless you when you least expected it. As they reached the ranch and carried their sleeping children inside, Caleb caught her hand and pulled her close for one more kiss under the stars of the new century. "Here is to the next 100 years, my love," he said. "Make that forever," she countered, and he laughed and agreed. Together they went inside their home, built on the foundation of a chance meeting on a snowy road and strengthened by years of partnership, respect, and devotion. The fire in the hearth was banked but still glowing, ready to be rekindled in the morning, just like their love constant, warm and enduring. Years later, when their grandchildren would ask how they met, Beatrice and Caleb would tell the story of the stage robbery, the snowdrift, and the cowboy who stopped to help. They would talk about how quickly they fell in love, how certain they had been despite knowing each other for such a short time. And they would always end with the same lesson, that sometimes the worst moments of your life are actually doorways to the best ones, if you are brave enough to step through them. Their story became legendary in Rawlins, a tale told to inspire and entertain, but for Caleb and Beatrice, it was simply their truth. They had found each other against all odds, built something lasting from a moment of crisis, and created a legacy of love that would echo through generations. And every January, on the anniversary of the day they met, they would return to that spot by the road, hold each other close, and give thanks for the day she was pushed from a moving stage into the drifts, and the cowboy happened by and stopped to help.